Hi, welcome to another episode of the Just-in-Time Web Show. I'm really excited to bring a topic to you that is of major concern for us as foster parents, and that is bullying. And we have with us today Shelba Waldron, and she is a senior program consultant with the Juvenile Welfare Board, and she speaks all over about this topic. So really excited to bring her to you and have a discussion about bullying today. But first, I've got a few announcements to make. We have recently posted a couple videos on our website, and that web address, just in case you've forgotten, is www.jitfl.com. And we've posted one on, it's a life skills training. It's on nutrition and food buying, what you need to know. And this is a great training for you to not only use yourself and use for the kids in your home, but to teach those older teens, you know, how to make these good choices and, you know, buy food on a budget and read the labels. So I hope you'll enjoy that video we've posted. We've also recently posted another video, and that is on substance abused infants, and it goes into the development of infants and how the use of different substances affects them in their development and behaviors throughout their life. So it's a really great training by Dr. Sandra Settle, and I hope you'll get a chance to take a look at that. Also, we've posted some of our previous episodes of this web show, and I hope you've had a chance to look at those as well. We had an update from Alan Abramowitz in the Guardian Litem program about the Let Kids Be Kids Act and how that is impacting foster parents and youth in the system. Also regarding the holidays, although this is after the holidays, but still a great episode to take a look at. And we have the one posted on foster parents and foster families and the grief and loss they feel when a child is transitioned out of the home. So those are all under episodes under season 3, so take a look at those as well. Well, that's all my announcements for now, and I'm excited to turn this over to Shelba and have a great discussion with her about bullying. So welcome, Shelba.
Thank you for having me.
Well, bullying, you know, is a major concern for, I think, all parents and foster parents in particular. And we've just been hearing a lot of media reports about bullying, and it's just kind of, I think, taken us by storm, a lot of the things that are going on. So could you kind of, first of all, just fill the viewers in on what's going on with bullying and why it's become such a problem recently?
First of all, bullying has not just become a problem recently. This is an age-old problem. I mention this when I do a lot of lectures. I talk about, even in literature, going back to Shakespeare, there are examples of bullying. What has happened is the media, to be honest with you, has gotten a hold of bullying. And because of the number of suicides that occurred probably in the mid-2000s, the 2004-05 time frame, and once those suicides occurred, and once we started realizing on a national level that there was rising levels of violence in the schools, you know, the states started passing laws. And Florida was one of the first, after Pennsylvania, to pass our bullying law, which was the Jeffrey Johnston Stand Up for Students Act, which is a very good law. And it requires the schools to have designated personnel who address bullying. It requires mandating processes, you know, things like that, consequences if the children need it, counseling in some schools. So what has happened is when those laws got passed and the media got a hold of it, it almost was a snowball effect. Mm-hmm. And now we're in a situation, I don't know, 7 or 8 years later, where people really don't know what's bullying, what's teasing, what's natural childhood behavior, sometimes natural childhood aggression. Mm-hmm. We know that younger boys like to play and they like to wrestle and they like to punch, maybe not punch people, but they'll throw pillows and things like that. And I'll go out to schools or even child care centers and they'll say, well, all our kids are bullying. I'm like, well, let's walk through.
Right.
Let's walk through what they're really doing.
Is this really bullying, or is some of this just typical play?
It's typical play. Maybe the children see violence on television and they act it out. It's not bullying.
Right.
And it's only bullying when it takes on certain traits. Mm-hmm. So,
well, Shelba, you know, our audience here is mainly caregivers and foster parents. And do you see a difference in maybe bullying, how it's perceived by a foster child, or maybe do you see a difference in how foster children may be a target of bullying versus the other children in population?
Well, we know that there are there have been identified on an international level. What's interesting is that this problem has been is being addressed on an international level. So the research is being done all over the world. And so one of the things that we do know is there are certain groups of kids that are getting bullied, more so than anyone can be bullied, but more so than others. For example, we know that children who are gay or perceived gay are bullied so much more than children who are not perceived gay. We know that children who are overweight, and we know that children who come from poverty. A lot of times that is your foster care kids. Sometimes also another group that is getting bullied quite frequently is your kids who would be considered disabled, either socially or physically, kids with autism. They are getting relentlessly bullied in the schools, and we know that some of those kids are also in foster care. I think the way to address it, to really look at it, is any child can be bullied. What's happening with foster care kids, and there's not a significant level of research, it's more of an opinion. Kids in foster care come from sometimes significant levels of trauma, sometimes abuse, substance abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and so they carry that trauma with them. And any child who has gone through trauma, it's almost like they wear it on their sleeve. So what could be perceived as teasing might come out as I've just been bullied, whereas it might just be teasing. And that's why we have to teach the kids the difference between bullying and then teasing. And although teasing is not nice, teasing's still a little bit more natural for children than that bullying, which is abuse.
Well, Shelba, that makes complete sense to me. Do you think sometimes that our children in foster care might be just like really sensitive to how the kids are interacting just because of their own feelings about them being in foster care and what they've been going through?
I think they can, and I think they probably are. One of the things we know, that take children in poverty, for example, they know when they come to school, those children, for example, they know they don't have the right shoes. Shoes are a big deal. And I actually just recently learned this. For some reason, I lost that. I went to a school and the kids were saying, oh, if you don't have the right shoes, you get bullied. And I was like, well, my Lord.
I know. Thought we just needed shoes like that are on our feet and they work, right?
So the kids come to school, those kids in poverty, for example, they come to school, they know how they dress. Some of them know how they smell. Because hygiene is a problem in poverty. So they're already prepared for the fight. If you're in foster care, I could only surmise a little bit that you're coming from you're not in a biological home necessarily. You're not coming from a place where the other children are coming from, and they know that. Mm-hmm. They know that they're probably perceived as different, so they could probably wear that on their sleeve. They also have the potential to be the bully, because they're going to go ahead and act. So before you even come at me, I'm going to go ahead and come at you. So there's that dual side to that as well.
Well, I could see some of that coming as defense mechanisms, or even if they've come from a home where there's been a lot of domestic violence, or they've seen those kind of interactions within their own family dynamics, which a lot of times has happened, and that's why they're removed, that they could possibly kind of duplicate that and take out those same aggressions and use those same behaviors on other kids and become bullies themselves. So I could certainly see that. Well, another question I had for you is, parents and teachers are a big influence on children, but what are some of the other influences that you see that are really affecting children in bullying today?
This is my favorite topic on bullying. Okay. I think the media has a huge responsibility. And not because of the way it gets framed in, let's say it's on a national level and they're talking about for example, after school shooting, we always talk about what is the cause? Why do people do it? And then everyone points to media. There's all this violence on television. I don't think it's that necessarily. I think, and there's slowly research coming out on it, on things like reality television. So I'll give you an example. You have a show like Bad Girls, and you have women specifically who are set up to scream at each other, to yell at each other, to call each other names, to fight, to get drunk and go out and party, and then they need a man. It's framed that way. The shows are framed that way. So children see this, and their brains are not completely developed. They don't have the frontal lobe that that an adult has. They don't understand consequences. They don't understand social skills the way an adult understands social skills. So if they're coming from an environment already where there's domestic violence, or they're coming from an environment where mom and dad might not be the most appropriate adult to be around that child, when they see that show like Bad Girls, or they see the Kardashians even, and it's all this screaming at each other and constant me, it has to play out on the playground. I can't imagine that it wouldn't. The Girl Scouts Research Institute did a fascinating study about 4 years ago or so. They looked at, and I don't remember all the details, it's been a while, but about 1,500 girls, teenage girls, and they looked at some of what they watched. And then they separated those girls out into those who watch a lot of reality TV and those who do not watch a lot of reality TV. The girls who do not watch a lot of reality TV have better success rates in school. They have better behaviors in school. Those who watch a lot of reality TV, they started showing that these kids don't stay in school as long. They have higher teen pregnancy rates. So, and it's small studies like that, and although that's not a significant study by, in the world of research, it still showed us something. And those types of studies are being done all over the country in small little pockets. We're waiting for the big one to come. So hopefully somebody will do it soon.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, honestly, if you think about it, because the TV, the kids are watching a lot of TV, more TV now than they used to watch years and years ago. And even I've noticed with younger children, some of these shows that are on the regular channels, you notice a big difference in the way even the young children in the shows yell at their parents or disrespect their parents, and almost like their parents are sort of a joke in the shows. Have you noticed some of this?
Yeah, and that's kind of been that way, for years. But what's really interesting, this is what I really like to stress to parents, any parent. It's not like the TV of back. I grew up in the 80s, so it's not like TV back in the 80s. We had television, and we had radio, and we had a VCR. We could come home, we could tape something, watch it. Nowadays, we have what's called 360-degree media. And that is basically, I can take my cell phone, I can take my smartphone, I can be at school, I can watch anything I want at any point in time. There's no recording anymore. We can go on Hulu. There are so many ways to watch media. I can record violence, I can watch it on YouTube, I can watch it on a number of social media sites, and I can keep watching it and watching it and watching it. That has to impact the brain, and it has to impact the way you perceive yourself. Another great organization that I encourage everyone to check out is the Gina Davis Institute. This institute is geared specifically towards women, and it's what they look at specifically is how women are portrayed in the media. And it started with, they do research, and what it did is it started with looking at women behind the scenes. So how many women are directors and producers and writers and women like that. And then when they looked at the appalling numbers of how many men versus women, they started realizing, well, no wonder we have these disproportionate body shapes of women. In Disney, for example, you have, I know this is a little off the topic of bullying, but in Disney, for example, you have women who would never fit, they're not real women. They would never fit that body shape. But when young girls grow up thinking, I have to look like this, then you go to school and I don't look like this. So I'm already coming in there with this low self-esteem. Right. Now you really don't look like this. So we're going to start going at each other, and then it's just taken to the extremes. We go from Disney when they're young to reality television, to look at pop music. And I'm a big fan of just about any type of music, but it is very clear women have to have a particular image and men have to have a different image. So what Gina Davis, the Institute, is looking at is how does that impact the way the girls see themselves? And then when they have to see it in a 360-degree format, how does that impact their minds? And they have not connected it to bullying yet. I have to believe it's all connected. And that's just an opinion.
No, I could see that, absolutely. And it's speaking of this technology and this 360 degree, a lot of this bullying now we hear today which leads to my next question is technology and cyberbullying. We are just hearing so much about that. And you want to give us your thoughts on that and maybe some tips and techniques for foster parents, because, we need to, like you said, they have access to this, and this is getting to be a bigger and bigger problem. What can we do to help the children?
One of the things that I always start when I go out to talk to PTAs. So when you have parents who are brought together, or churches, they sometimes will bring parents together just to have an information session. And I start with, it's a real simple problem. Turn off the computer, turn off the cell phones. And then parents always come back at me with, how do you do that when the kids are fighting you and they're yelling at you? And I believe the cyberbullying problem, we could get a handle on it if parents would take the responsibility they take with the car. So, for example, if you're 16 years old and we just got you a car and I'm about to hand you over the keys, there's certain things that I would require as a parent. I would first of all want you to pay into that. We would set guidelines on, okay, I'll pay half of the payment, you pay half of the payment. If you don't pay half of the payment, you lose the car. Same thing with insurance. With the car comes responsibilities such as you can't have other kids in the car. And if you do, you lose the car. I mean, that was our big rule in my house. And I'll never forget growing up how I lost the car, because I had like 30 kids in like a small Toyota. And I lost it for like 2 weeks. And so it's setting boundaries, and it's setting simple boundaries. But it's upfront. So once you hand over that smartphone, parents have to understand, any parent, whether you're a biological parent or a foster parent, any parent has to understand that you're handing them the world.
Right.
And you're not just handing them a phone. It used to be where I'm going to give you a cell phone so you can call me and we can text each other. You're literally handing them access to the world. Right. And that puts children in danger. I believe children should have cell phones. It's the way of the world. And if you try to shield them from it, they're going to fight you on it. But you need to be setting guidelines. Same thing. So depending on their age, I'm going to say, let's say they're 14. Okay, so let's say at 9 o'clock the cell phone goes off and it's going to go into a basket on the kitchen counter. And if you don't do that, you will lose it for a day. If I find out you've come out to the kitchen in the middle of the night to grab the cell phone, you'll lose it for a week. Right. It could also be, one thing we know about cyberbullying is it's occurring late at night. So you set guidelines about when, literally, what you can use it from. You can't use it from 8 a.m. to, let's say, 8 p.m. You set those rules. But you also set rules of, there is no texting between this time and this time. There is nothing of this and this and this between this time and this time. That will stop it significantly. Turn off the computer between this time and this time. If they're younger kids, like middle schoolers, and they have access to the computer, which they probably should with school. Even my 6-year-old was asked to do a report for Thanksgiving on an Indian culture, and we had to look it up on the internet. I'm like, wow, at age of 6 they have to have internet access. But put the computer in the family room and put it where mom and dad can see it, put it where the guardian can see it. I always suggest the kitchen. If the kitchen is big enough and they have the kitchen table, it's not just a kitchen island. If they have just the regular kitchen table, put it on the kitchen table. And because the kitchen is the place where everybody comes. Everyone's wanting snacks, so you're constantly seeing what's on that computer screen. And if the child doesn't want you to see what's on the computer screen, then they probably shouldn't have the computer. Right, and you should probably take it away from them. I also tell parents, you have a wonderful trick called Wi-Fi access. Turn it off and give them the code. I would change the code. If you were having problems, change the code once a week. And if you want to continue to act out, we're not going to give you the Wi-Fi code. There's a lot of things you can do, and it's just a matter of being the adult about it. And I say that because there's a lot of parents out there I've talked to, and they really believe that they don't have the upper hand in this.
I believe that.
They do, and we're like, you have control. It's your cell phone plan. Take the phone. Well, they'll fight me and they'll act out. Well, maybe they need to, and maybe that's the next step. And
right.
Sometimes
the control battle a little bit. Yeah. And my friend, I know my son came home the other day, and he's 7, and he said, "There's a boy in my bus, and he's in kindergarten, and he has a phone." This is him justifying why I should get my first grader a phone. Yeah. I know. Is that too funny? Yeah. So I know they're working us all the time. Yeah. So I get that. Well, what would you suggest? Like, if you're getting some idea or, some thoughts that my child is being bullied on the internet, what would you as a parent do to handle that situation?
Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to teach your children, although you want to set the boundaries and the guidelines, part of the guidelines need to be what happens if you get contacted, or what happens if you get told something like a bullying situation. One of the things we also want to protect them from is the sexual predator problems out there. So you teach them how to recognize when you're being groomed a little bit, because that happens on the internet frequently. But specifically in a bullying situation, bullying is a lot about grooming as well. Like, you kind of feel out the person and how far can I push them? What buttons can I push? A great example of it, it's a horrible story, but it's a great example of a child being groomed by other kids. And it was on ABC. They can find it on YouTube. It was an ABC bullying story years ago. And what happened was this boy who was autistic, well, I don't think he was fully autistic. I think he was more Asperger's. So he had, let's say, Asperger's. He, has trouble with social skills. So these girls decided to friend him on, it wasn't Facebook at the time, probably MySpace or something. So they started chatting, and one of the girls pretended like she liked him, this boy, and he was probably 13, 14 years old, and started saying, we need to go out, we need to go on a date, we need to do all this stuff. So he's thinking, I finally got this girl who likes me. And she turns around, and this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And she turns around and basically say, I wouldn't go out with someone like you. And then what was happening at the time was all these other people in the school were watching this go down. The girl who was doing the bullying had all of these other people watching all of the internet stuff. So he was being made fun of at school and online. And unfortunately what happened was this child, when she said, I would never be with you, he went and killed himself. So the father went on ABC and basically said, this is what can happen. And that's the extreme end of it, obviously. Suicide is not as prevalent as people think. But what we can teach our children is girlfriends and boyfriends aren't made online. And, face to face, that's still the best way. Make sure your friends, you know who your friends are. Like, make sure you can physically see them, and you can, if someone really liked you, they would want to be with you. They would want to see you at school.
So teaching them some of these basic
social skills
is important. I know a lot of people hide behind technology today for social skills, texting and calling, and using the social media instead of actually meeting face to face, interacting with one another.
And teach them that that's just, it might seem old school and traditional, but no one would truly be your boyfriend or girlfriend unless they were willing to get to know you face to face. Some of the other things is, obviously, if violent texts or violent emails or social media messages come through, one of the things that the children need to do is understand they need to keep those messages, and they need to give it to mom and dad. And they need to be able to turn it over so mom and dad can assess it, especially if it is threatening in nature, because then we can get it to the police. The police really won't look at it until there's threats that come through. So it's not like you can just otherwise the police, that's all they would do is deal with bullying all day long.
I couldn't even imagine, right? There would probably be millions and millions of calls, from one kid threatening another or just being mean, and I could see how that would be a never-ending job.
Well, yeah, but if it truly does look like something that could be harmful, you need to turn it over. You need to save everything. The parents need to save all documentation. So if something is occurring in the home, chances are it's occurring at school. Talk to the principal. Build a relationship. I always tell this to parents. Build a relationship with the principal and the teachers before the bullying starts. Because the last thing you want is to show up on the principal's doorstep on a full day, and let's say it's in March during FCAT time or something where everyone's busy, and then they have to deal with a bullying situation. That's not the first time you want to meet the principal. Attend as many family events or as many school events as you can, and I realize that's very difficult in this day and age. But the school and the parents need to work hand in hand. And if they come at it as adversaries, then it's never going to get solved. But if the parents have talked to their children, done their job in advance, talked to their children about cyberbullying, talked to them, given them consequences and boundaries if something were to occur, having their children be able to recognize when bullying starts to happen. And I'm telling you, one of the things that people don't understand, it doesn't happen today. Bullying is this ongoing, it's a group of kids going at one kid over the course of time. It's just like domestic violence. I always try to compare it to domestic violence because let's say a woman starts dating a man. He doesn't start hitting her on the first day. He doesn't start verbally abusing her on the first day. It takes time. And what the goal of the abuser is to build up fear. Well, that's the goal of bullying, is to build fear. They don't start with just bullying you. They watch you, they stalk you, they look at you, they make sure that you have the weaknesses that they want, and then they start going at you. And that's what the children need to understand. So the parents need to understand. It's a complicated situation. But if the parents work with the kids, the parents work with the school, and vice versa, I think we can get a handle on this.
That's good. That's good. Definitely some good information there. And wow, it is becoming such a thing to stay on top of all these things, but I can't agree with you more that the best thing we could do is just stay involved.
Yeah.
And continue, like you said, to be the parent and monitor these things and set the boundaries. And if you're able to keep monitoring it, if you start to see it building, you can deal with it early on and until it doesn't become a huge, big problem.
One of the things I always try to tell parents to do is if they are to always ask about the anti-bullying policy at not just school. We always think about it in terms of school, but summer camp, extracurricular activities. So whatever the child is involved in, there should be a policy, especially the younger the children are. And the policy should read in terms of, we will not tolerate violence or any type of abuse towards our peers. There's tons of these policies out there. If you do, it should be a tiered system. You will get, so let's say summer camp. Summer camps will do something as in, you will be eliminated from this activity for, let's say, a day. If you do it again, this consequence, if you do it a third time, you're gone from the program. Right. And parents should ask about these policies. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, it's our responsibility to look out for our children. And we really have to start taking a proactive approach as opposed to the reactive, what do I do now approach.
Mm-hmm. Have they put together some new laws related specifically to cyberbullying, but even bullying in general, with all the media attention bullying's gotten recently?
They did. They passed a House bill back, and I don't remember the number of it. It's always has 3 numbers to it. But they passed a House bill back in July. And basically what that cyberbullying bill does, it's almost like a rider to the larger law, anti-bullying law. And what that actually does, it says that the schools have a wider reach now with cyberbullying. So before, what the problem has always been is, how far can the school's arm go? Right. And the way the law really reads, the current law, before the cyberbullying law came about, what that used to be is, if it's not happening on school grounds or at a school event or on a school bus, we can't do anything about it. So that's where cyberbullying took hold. So the kids, yes, bullying still occurs at school, but schools can't touch me when I'm at home. Now, the way it reads, and I want to put this out there, I'm not an expert in this law at all, and I'm not sure anybody is. Mm-hmm. So I encourage you to do some research on it. But basically the way it reads now, from what I've been told and from what the conversations that have been had at the community level, is if the cyberbullying is occurring at home and that gets brought into the school, which it always does, kids would have to be so sophisticated to not let that come into the school, but it almost always does, then the school can reach into that home. Now, what they do with it, I think, is the problem. I think we don't know how far they can take it, and if the schools they can now follow Facebook accounts. They have a wider latitude to follow social media accounts. They can require, I don't think any are, but I think they could require, we want access to friend us, and we're going to watch your Facebook accounts. I know that there are companies, and I just read an article about it out of California. There's a school system that hired a company that's going to monitor the kids' Facebook accounts for certain words that would fall into the levels of violence and bullying. I don't know if that's going to pass through a First Amendment standpoint, but it's coming down the pike. Mm-hmm. So,
oh, it's good to know, and I think at least it gives us some reassurance that steps are being taken, and that we as parents, when we go and we try to fight the fight, because it's advocating for our children that we're trying to do, that we know that we're going to get some support from the school system, and lawmakers and the police and all the other entities, because that at least gives us that reassurance and makes us feel like we're going to get the help when we need it.
Well, look at the case just currently in our own community of Lakeland. And when you look at that specific case, that was a cyberbullying. Well, let me just also say this. Cyberbullying does not always start with cyberbullying. It almost always starts with bullying. Bullying in a traditional sense is alive and well, living in our school systems, living in our schools, on our playgrounds. So a child being, so I'm going to have to backtrack a little bit, but a child being bullied at school by, the old view of Biff from Back to the Future, stealing of the backpack, slamming them into lockers, calling them names. He called him Butthead, I think, was what was always in the movie. But the name calling, that still occurs, and it's very much alive and well. And it's the more prevalent, actually, form of bullying, especially for the younger kids. The cyberbullying takes place once that ends at the schoolyard, so it goes online. That was a very similar case of what happened in Lakeland. So with the cyberbullying, the police and the prosecutors decided they could go after now children who are cyberbullying, that they felt like they could make a case. And although we don't really know what happened behind the scenes, we don't really know the true situation, because we can only tell what we can read in the paper. We know enough to know that we had two high-powered lawyers get onto the victim side and the bully side. We know that we had prosecutors and a sheriff wanting to go after the kids doing the cyberbullying, and we know that there was a significant amount of verbal abuse that went with this. This was a landmark case, and regardless of what came out of it, because now prosecutors can now look at this and go, okay, it set a precedent. Right. And I think children need to take heed a little bit, that you're going to play around online. Whether you end up in jail or not is irrelevant, because the last thing you want is to be removed from your school, be put on some sort of suspension, having to be, let's say, homeschooled when you don't want to be homeschooled, having to go to an alternative school while this plays out in court. And when you look back, and the first time this happened was in Boston with the Phoebe Prince case. When Phoebe Prince killed herself, the prosecutor went after the 8 or 9 kids that were doing the bullying, and they all got charges. Some, though, ended up, I think most of it was pled down, but these were kids looking at college careers, and that impacted where they went to college. It impacts, talk about consequences. The consequences are not always getting kicked out of school. You're now in the paper, your name is now in the paper, so every time you get Googled for a job, I think these kids need to start understanding, and we as adults need to start teaching our children about our web presence. And you screw up now, it's out there.
It's out there.
It's out there.
It's so true, and there's really long-term consequences and significant consequences that come from these actions, and they don't sometimes understand that. They get caught up in the moment with their friends, and they think it's funny, and and what's funny, Shelba, is it kind of leads me to a thought. Talking about the story a few minutes ago about the girl and the young boy with Asperger's, and I was thinking, isn't it sad that it's got to the point that the kids didn't feel that what they were doing was wrong, and they didn't have that heart, like, I'm hurting someone's feelings. Here are some practical tips for managing cyberbullying. Create a written contract for your children that address some of these issues. Times, cell phones, and the internet may or may not be used. Websites your child may or may not visit. A list of their social media accounts and their passwords. That the parent has the right to be added to the friends list of the social media accounts, a commitment that the child will not give out any personal information such as phone numbers and addresses or even photos to strangers. Any threats by friends or strangers will be reported to the parents immediately, that the child will not engage in cyberbullying by passing negative, tasteless, pornographic, or attacks on someone's character to another person, and all cyberbullying texts, emails, and instant messages will be kept and given to the parent. Remember, this contract should outline all consequences for not following the agreed upon guidelines. These tips, along with many others, can be downloaded here to help minimize the risk and allow practical management of cyberbullying. And so I guess that was going to lead me into a question of, what can parents do to try to teach their kids from young ages to, kind of watch out for each other and the kid that's being picked on, and maybe even stand up for that kid, and then to have that empathy where they're not, getting involved in that, and to have enough self-confidence if, like, say they have some friends that are doing this and they know it's wrong, to not take part in it. And you know what I'm saying?
Well, there's several things happening, but not at the level I would like it to happen. But one of the things that I think we need to be teaching our children, and from, I would say, birth, is about their community. And I strongly believe that if I teach my son to, let's say, care about the next door neighbor, and let's start with our next door neighbor. So let's introduce ourselves. This is, who they are, then he understands these are my neighbors, and then I present to him, I tell him, they, by the way, are watching you, and so we're kind of going to grow the community out. Get our kids involved in helping out, let's say, a homeless man. I don't think there's anything wrong with someone's asking for money on the street, regardless of how you feel about it. Handing your child $1 and saying, you go give the $1 to him, and then saying he doesn't have enough and we have enough. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to teach our children, and you could do that in a number of ways. We're going to go to a park and pick up trash. That's helping your community. What happens with foster care kids is their sense of belonging to their community starts to crumble. Yeah. So I think one of the things foster care parents can do on that level is take them into the community as much as possible. Just regular events, I don't know, like the one that always happens in May, the Taste of Pinella. It's always, and this is your community. These are people in it. Take them to the beach. Take them to places where people play and people hang out. And I just think it's important. Take them back. Some of these children could use spirituality, and show them that. Take them into the church. Regardless of what you believe in, take them somewhere and show them that this is a house of love. And we don't hurt each other here. And there are places in the world, actually I think there are more places than not, where love exists over hate. Absolutely. And I think we have to reverse that. And I think that would also trend the bullying. The bullying trend is, I think, not going anywhere. And if we can get our kids to be more in the community and realize, I can't hurt my community. Right. We know, like, let's say abusers of domestic violence, if they harm animals, we know that they have a propensity for violence later on in life. So we got to teach our children about animals. Taking them to, I used to work at PIMS, and we used to take the children who had been abused to, they had a pet store that let you go in and sit down with the little puppies and play with them. And it was amazing how the children were so afraid to touch the puppy because they had never been touched in a way that was appropriate. Mm-hmm. Either they had been touched inappropriately sexually or inappropriately physically. Right. So we would have to teach them how to pet the puppy. Gentle, and loving. That dogs are natural loving beings. Mm-hmm. And so they would lick them and stuff like that. And we would say, oh, that's a good thing to be licked, and it means he wants to be your friend. Mm-hmm. And I think all of this stuff can trend the bullying problem down.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I like that, definitely. Just that overall feeling of compassion towards others. And if we can kind of instill that in them young, I think
you're so lacking it.
I know.
And I teach the parents want to know all these great tricks of the trade, and I always say I don't. Mm-hmm. I don't think there are tricks of the trade as much as it's, I think, going back to a traditional parenting style. And as a parent of a 6-year-old, it is difficult in this day and age to raise kids, and for a number of reasons. But the violence alone that they see, the commercials right now for a lot of the shows that my son watches, which are the regular, everyday 5, 6-year-old, 7-year-old type of shows, they're showing violent images of media games. And that's fine if you want to play it, but I don't want him seeing those mind-numbing kills.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what's funny about that is they're so realistic now. Yeah. The graphics now, back in the day, you knew that was a video game, but now they almost look like movies and real people. It's scary.
And when I was talking about media, that's another level of media. It's not Pac-Man anymore.
The games.
It's and so you take a child who, let's say, has seen domestic violence, and then you give them the smartphone, you give them television, you give them radio,
Call of Duty on top
you give
of
them
it.
Call of Duty. They're getting media coming at them. So I think one of the things we can also do, the foster parents really should take note of what they might have been exposed to, not just on a physical level, but on a virtual level, and we can start reversing those trends as well.
It's a good point. Well, I think what would be interesting if you could give us some advice is, just like on a practical standpoint, like if my foster child came home today and said, you know, Miss Lora, I need to talk to you. I've been being bullied by so-and-so at school. And let's say he gives me some examples, enough that I'm justified that it's maybe a little bit beyond, beyond normal kid stuff, okay? What would you suggest would be my plan of action with him and then with his school so we could kind of handle the situation?
Well, I think the first thing that they have to understand is there are definitions that the schools follow. One is teasing, one is bullying. And so you have to ask your child, for example, has this occurred before? So you want to know, we want to look at, is this a trend? Is this happening every day? Not that it should ever happen, but if it happens once, that's one thing. If it happens 10 times, that's a completely different scenario. So you have to ask that question, is this the first time it's happened, or has this happened before? Also ask, who are these children? So you want to know names. Well, I don't want to tell you names. That's the first thing they don't want to do, is they don't want to snitch. Well, you're not snitching, honey. I promise you, and I'm not. And you want to assure them, I'm not going to go to the school and start. They have this image. Children have this image that mom and dad are going to go to the school and, I don't know, take on these children at the bus stop or something. And so you have to assure them that that's not going to happen. You have to also assure them that you're not just going to run into the school and take on the principal. So just say, I'm not going to do anything just yet. I just really want to know the situation. Just give me as many details as possible. Also realizing that a lot of times when children have been traumatized, they don't remember details. So kind of walk them through a little bit. Can you tell me, were there 3 kids? Was there 1 kid? Right. So try to get the number down, first of all. How did they do it? Where did this happen? Did it happen in the hallway? Did it happen in math class? Did it happen on the bus? So you don't really want to give them the answers, but sometimes the children don't know how to answer the questions.
So you're just walking them through. Right.
Right. So you want to ask them who, how many, where, and how. So how did this happen? Did they call you any names? Yeah, they called me such and such and so and so. Did they steal anything? No, they didn't steal anything. Okay, so you're kind of getting an idea that it's not going to be a physical level of bullying. It might be a more emotional, mental level of bullying. And the parents need to write it down as if you're a policeman or a detective taking notes, and try not to do it in front of the children. The children just believe if you're sitting there writing, what is she going to do with that information? They're already, if you also think of foster care kids, they've been in the system. They know what it's like to sit with social workers and policemen and a litany of people, and they've had paperwork and they've had notes taken, and they've had people just, you want to just pull back and just talk with them. And just say, I just want to.
I care about
I care.
you. I want, yeah.
Yeah, and then you want to explain to them. You want to try to discern whether, and I say this with any kid, was this a situation that you've blown up in your mind? Because a lot of times it is. Oh, yeah. I've been called to the schools before, and when you really got down to it, those 2 girls. And no offense to the ladies, but it seems to be girls more than boys on this scenario. They have created some level of drama over some boy, over some situation, and it has blown up into bullying. And it's not bullying. It's 2 girls who needed that drama. So try to find out, is this drama that the child is creating? Because that's a possibility, and it's a high possibility. Is this maybe a way to get attention? You have to start kind of realizing this might not be bullying. And this is, I think, the problem we have with bullying is parents want to jump into the fray, and they believe their child's being bullied. Sometimes they're not. So is it a long-term, has this been going on before? Are these kids that you know? If they are these kids that you've been friends with in the past? If they're not, you want to figure out, how did you guys kind of end up together in this situation? So you just want to ask those questions. If you, as a parent, feel that this warrants going to the school, you need to do it with discretion, and you need to do it with, I want to say, very appropriate professional behaviors, because the principal, the teacher, administrators, they're going to be coming at you with this mindset of they have been yelled at by parents, it's a distrust situation right now that goes on a lot of times between parents and the school system. So you want to come at it with a strength-based approach, with a positive approach. So go to the principal and say, this is what my child told me. Can you help me? Can you answer any of these questions? Have you seen this? If it's a big school, they're not going to have seen it. The kids are smart. They're not going to bully in front of the principal or the teachers. They're going to bully in the bathrooms. They're going to bully in the back of the bus. They're going to bully at the lockers. So you want to get as many details as possible for those teachers, because they're the ones that have to watch out for it. And the parents also have to understand nothing's going to get settled today. There's nothing that can get settled today. They have to watch out for it. Now, they might be able to call the kids into the office. There's a number of things they can do, but it's a long-term process, and parents have to take a step back and realize this. You've got to have patience. It's hard to have patience with your children because you want them to be safe at all times. But you have to have patience, and the parents who have the patience are the ones who end up succeeding in the end.
Okay, that's excellent advice for us to help manage the whole situation, and I think to work as professional partners with the school. I think that's what the whole thing is we all have the same best interests at heart, but it's how we're going to achieve it, because like you said, I could certainly see myself in their shoes, and it would be very difficult, and a lot of times they know, like we know, that the kids are, like you said, maybe craving attention and blowing things out of proportion, but if we can make them aware, maybe they could keep their eyes open and help us with it. Right. So very, very good information. Well, I don't know that we have too much more to cover on this subject, so I'll just ask if you have any other closing comments or suggestions, that you'd like to share with our viewers and foster parents out there just related to this, and maybe some resources that you could guide them to if they're sitting at home and they'd like to, go to a website or where they could find even some of the information that you referenced.
StopBullying.gov is probably the signature premier bullying site. Mm-hmm. There's others out there, but that one's going to give you the information you truly need, and it's going to guide you towards other websites. So I think it is just stopbullying.gov. It's a government website. Another one is they can contact me at swaldron, WALDRON, at jwbpinellas.org, and then depending on the county, I can help guide you to the resources. Each school, I do want to say this, each school handles bullying differently. Some schools are better at it than others. Some schools are fantastic at it, and some schools are facing other issues where bullying is just another product of the problems they are dealing with. And I can help them navigate that a little bit if they want to. We're not a parent referral site, JWB isn't necessarily, but I am put in a position to where if they are truly struggling getting through to a school or a principal, maybe we can find somebody in that school system that they can almost be an advocate.
Okay, and we'll post your contact information right on the show so they can contact you. So, well, thank you, Shelba. It was great having you, and it's some wonderful information, and I hope everybody out there enjoyed this conversation and learned a lot, and I hope this really helps you in, just dealing with this situation as it comes up in your home. So, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. And just a few things I wanted to say at the end here is we are always looking for your thoughts, your comments, your suggestions for topics or even presenters. So please email us at qpiflorida@usf.edu, or you can check us out on our Facebook page, and we're going to post the link to that right here on the show. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day, and always thank you for everything you're doing for our children.